Yeah.
Oh my God.
You need anything? You good?
I got you. Coach right back. Point. Look back. You just pay like the base.
Well, that was interesting, huh?
Tilt your head all the way back like this.
I'm gonna take this.
Open your eyes. Yeah. Open your eyes. Point. Alright. I got coach back. Now blink that out and take something you have that didn't touch the gas and dab your eyes out. Dab your eyes out. Wait, I have one more thing to go out to.
Is that all tear gas or is my eyes cloudy?
It's your contacts.
Mother of God.
Give me it back and Well, the breeze is nice. That helps.
Great.
Every time they're gonna come close. It's like working in an app.
Matt, we gotta go. Let's go this way. Let's upwind.
Yeah,
What's your name?
Matt Gregory.
Matt Gregory. Okay. You okay?
Yeah, it is what it is.
You're coming around. Well, just stay. As long as we stay upwind here, we're good.
We can still stay together. I can't
Yeah.
see. I can't look.
Yeah, Kunu. Yeah, just keep your hand on him. Yeah.
So this is Kunu live from DC. Shakumaku. Oh, this might.
Heads up.
Jesus, Mary Joseph. Be careful behind you. Fine now. I'm good with that. It's the eyes that.
I know.
Yeah.
You good, James?
Yeah, I'm good.
We got.
Here you go, bro. See those hands.
You good, dude?
Thanks, man.
Hey, you alright?
Oh, thanks.
Hey, I just read an unbelievable article in the Epic Times. Take a look. It's an investigation into the mysterious origins of the Are you tired of the media spinning the truth and pushing false narratives? Well, take a look at this. Over the last
I'm gonna go get some. Go. See here.
Scene and start taking care of this. They have to first go with the police and they have to rope off the area, make sure it's safe. So that's one level of work they have to do, and it just takes more time for them to get there. That could have caused this fire to spread even more. And the other thing I'm thinking is there are businesses on either side.
Right, and that's what they may end up doing, is going in what they call a defensive mode. But hopefully there's a firewall in these buildings here to protect the adjacent buildings here. So you have a couple of buildings here that's in the path of the fire. Fire department's going to do everything they can. And, you know, resources are really stretched. Kathy, in News Chopper 4 Alpha, we were over downtown Los Angeles. We saw multiple rubbish fires. They have their hands full in downtown LA with a bunch of looting areas near 7th and Main and Broadway. So there's a lot of activity there. They do have multiple small rubbish fires. People are lighting trash cans on fires in downtown, but nothing of this magnitude. You can see the intensity of this fire. It is just consuming this entire building. Firefighters, looks like they may even have to pull back here because of those intense flames right now.
Makes you wonder what is fueling this fire.
You know, I was just thinking the same thing. I don't know what's in this building here. I heard there was a couple of small businesses here.
Tony K Shoe Store, I believe, is what, yeah, there you see on the outside, Tony K Shoe Store.
Yeah, so if you got a shoe store there, you can imagine all the products in there, all the cardboard boxes and everything that is fueling that fire that is just really rapidly consuming this building, and the buildings next to it. The radiant heat is what's going to be an issue there. The fire definitely may start with these buildings just because they're so close together right now. So firefighters are still battling this right now. This is, again, the 7500 block of Melrose here as they are dealing with this fire. One of many fires here erupting here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we saw the nail salon or nail shop that was on fire earlier. They were still about 30 or 40 minutes ago. I don't know what the situation is now, but now we're seeing this fire here at the shoe shop. This is the largest fire I think that we have seen tonight, other than the little spot fires. And of course, earlier, several patrol cars, LAPD patrol cars were set ablaze as well. So the fire department has been busy taking care of a lot of those fires. But this one just huge, as we're seeing plumes of smoke and that huge fireball right there in the middle of the store, which we believe, if we're looking at the sign, is some type of a shoe store there on Melrose.
Yeah, that's right. And Kathy, I just also want to add, you know, I look out the everywhere. I'm seeing law enforcement responding with their lights and sirens. So they are just going to multiple areas. They're hearing about looting. They're hearing about small rubbish fires. So it is just a chaotic situation. And just moments ago, somebody pointed a green laser at the helicopters as well. And, you know, you have law enforcement helicopters up here trying to direct officers down below into a safe direction to try to disperse some of these crowds. And now they have to worry about somebody with the laser shooting at the helicopters. That can be a very dangerous situation, not only for the police, but also for the media helicopters here as well.
Absolutely. On a normal night, Megan, we would be covering that as an entire story. It's illegal and very dangerous, as you said. That could be a story for us, and yet it's just part of the scenario we're seeing, where we are seeing looting, outright looting, just people smashing windows and taking items out of the store. And we're seeing fires set in various areas. We've had officers injured as well. I've seen some protesters earlier in the day who were down in the street because we kept seeing people running. And of course, you're going to have injuries. So really, it's just been an incredible afternoon into the evening. And now, as we are approaching 9:30, we are well into the curfew that was put into place at 8 o'clock. And now we have word that the National Guard will arrive at midnight. 100 National Guardsmen being deployed to this area. What we heard from our investigative reporter, Eric Leonard, was that they would help just to take up some of the slack right now, because we have these officers on 12-hour shifts. And Colleen, you've been here at night covering some of these demonstrations. They are taxed.
Well, it's interesting because they typically ratchet up at night, and the National Guard is going to be here to provide force protection and security. That, of course, according to the sheriff. Now, I want to ask Megan, because you've just flown through the area, you had to put down to refuel, and then you turned around and came right back. So you've got a broader picture of more than just this fire right now. What did you see on your way in? Are there still protesters out there? Are there more fires out there? What can you tell us?
Colleen, right now it's hard to see the protesters unless if we're exactly over the area because it's nightfall, but they are out there. I'm listening to LAPD, and it's really getting busy in downtown Los Angeles with looting. We did hear about an officer who was injured near Spring and 7th. Somebody threw a rock, possibly a broken wrist, according to the scanner traffic. So what I'm seeing is just a lot more commotion. And as I said, as I look out the window in every direction, 360 degrees here, I'm seeing police officers with their lights and sirens responding to multiple calls. We do see a lot of smoke in the air from earlier fires. We did see a couple of fires in downtown Los Angeles. This one here on Melrose Avenue. This is the biggest fire we have yet to see. It's a very unfortunate circumstances. What started off as a peaceful protest in Pan Pacific Park today, people were out there protesting, and unfortunately a few individuals just took it to this level, and this is why there is a mandatory curfew. But unfortunately, we're just seeing a lot of mayhem down below. And again, as Kathy said, it normally would be a story we would focus on, getting lasered by an individual. The green laser lit up the helicopter here in News Chopper 4 Alpha. That is pretty bright. Great job here by our pilot, Derek Bell, just maintaining the, the stability of this helicopter. But that's just, we're just seeing a lot of pandemonium and a lot of chaos below. And those those police helicopters, they are relaying information down to the officers below. They want to make sure those officers are safe. So when people have those lasers and they're pointing them at the helicopters, that's a very dangerous situation there for the pilots as well as for the media helicopters. So we're all in this together right now. They're trying to make sure those firefighters are safe there. No, we don't see any immediate crowd here. So fortunately, these firefighters can concentrate on this building right now as we're watching. It looks like they are starting to get a little bit of an upper hand. We still see a lot of fire on the roof, but the good news, it's not spreading to any of these local businesses right next to it.
It looks like they've really confined it so that the rest of the businesses, and as we said earlier, these are all connected. This is almost an entire city block. You've got the Starbucks on one side, you've got the shoe store, and then you that we're looking so forward, I'm sure, to opening and getting back to some sense of normalcy here, and then all of a sudden this happened. Megan, we're going to continue to look at your picture here. We're going to bring in Eric Leonard once again, who's been talking with people at the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department. Eric.
Good evening. The word that we're getting from department commanders is that they feel like they've made some significant progress in clearing out a number of the demonstrators and reducing the risk to the public, although it's really hard to feel that when you watch the pictures that we've been seeing all night tonight. The number of people that the police officers out on the Fairfax area are confronting or having to interact with has dropped dramatically, they tell us, in the last hour or so. We're now thinking it's more in the neighborhood of several or many dozens rather than the hundreds that we saw earlier. Nonetheless, the department seems to be addressing more and more serious problems, even though there are fewer and fewer people wandering around on the streets. Certainly the fires have presented a whole new issue for them to deal with, and then certainly the looting has captured the attention of dozens and dozens of officers down there. The sheer exhaustion amongst the people working the LAPD, we're told, is a huge, huge factor. You have many of the people who are working in crowd control tonight are the same groups of officers who were working almost all night last night in downtown LA, and a good portion of them were the same group of officers who were working Thursday night. And so that is perhaps part of what's behind this decision to try to bring in more outside help, specifically the National Guard, to try to relieve some of the demands on the department, not only so that certain groups can go home and get some rest, but also so the LAPD can restore its core services in other parts of the city, responding to radio calls, doing general patrol work, those things that had to be shut down while they focused all of this attention on this area tonight.
And Eric, you were saying that they can also bring in officers from other cities. We heard some information about officers coming in from the Inland Empire, so this could be the Sheriff's Department. They can call other resources locally, maybe Ventura County.
That's right. There's long-standing mutual aid agreements between most of the police departments in Southern California. At some levels, it's coordinated through the state of California. Everybody relies on one another when a particular incident overwhelms the local agency. This happens constantly when they're dealing with massive wildfires in the fire department. This happens with contingency planning for big natural disasters. So the plans are in place to do it. It was a little unexpected tonight from what we've heard. That was part of the delay in getting additional people from outside areas. But they're well set up to do this. It sounds to us from the contacts we've had in local law enforcement that the expectation simply wasn't there, that the events of tonight would grow in the way they did, really exponentially in maybe the 2 to 3 to 4 o'clock hour this afternoon. And people have, from all sorts of different agencies, have been scrambling to keep up. As you pointed out, it's not just the local agencies that help one another. It's also neighboring counties, Ventura County, San Bernardino, Riverside County, Orange County, where they have less local unrest to deal with, certainly have the ability to send people out here. What's unusual, though, is that rarely is it a department the size of the LAPD that's asking for help. After all, it's 10,000 officers strong. Typically, when there's a problem in one part of the city, officers can be drawn in from other parts of the city, and whatever needs to be managed gets managed. This is one of the first times in recent memory where the department has dealt with something that is such a large problem in so many different areas that it's really put a stress on the ability of it to manage right now. And that's why we're seeing these calls for help to outside agencies.
And Robert, I'm sorry, Robert is standing by. We're going to get to him next. But Eric, what can you tell us about the National Guard?
Well, it's interesting. We're still hearing an evolving set of circumstances of how the National Guard is going to be assisting. At first, for certain, National Guard troops will be able to relieve LAPD officers who've had to do things like traffic control, controlling crowds and intersections. Not so much of the hands-on police work that we're seeing officers carry out right now, much more in a supportive role. That may change. That may evolve over several days, but it is certainly not the initial intention to have National Guard troops step in and take the place of LAPD officers in most conventional policing jobs. The National Guard was called in back in 1992 to help the city manage the unrest, and there were, when the incidents and the planning and the events were all looked at days and weeks later, it was clear that the National Guard then was not well prepared to do the kinds of things that the LAPD really needed assistance with. That's changed. There have been many more recent discussions about how to integrate the military, National Guard in a catastrophic type incident. This is not the type of incident that was being considered when those discussions happened. It was far more along the lines of natural disaster planning. But nonetheless, there are working plans in order for this to happen. Again, it sounds like the National Guard is going to be in a mostly supportive role, at least in the first hours. But given how everything has changed so quickly today, how the department has clearly been overwhelmed and has now been pushed to its limits, there's a good chance that that role could evolve in the coming days as well.
I remember it well, and even in a supportive role, what you see are men in uniforms on the streets of L.A., and at that time, if I remember correctly, they were helping to protect firefighters who, like this situation, were sort of moving from spot to spot trying to put out fires.
There were terrible tragedies in the 1992 riots involving firefighters. There were, if memory serves me, firefighters were struck by gunfire trying to protect blocks that had caught fire, and fires were going to catastrophically spread from home to home, business to business, and it was a real desperate situation. That caused quite a bit of reluctance on the part of firefighters, who see themselves as far less polarizing than the police force when they get sent into a neighborhood, and yet they were still being met with the kind of response that the police department was seeing. That was then. Plans have changed now. You've seen all night tonight groups of police officers who've been sent along to escort the firefighters so they don't have to watch their backs when they're trying to do their core job, whether that's saving somebody's life, helping somebody who's been injured, or putting out fires like this. It doesn't sound like that is a role the National Guard might play right away, but again, everything is changing hour by hour here. When we first spoke today, I think it was around 3 o'clock, there were plans in place for the LAPD to sweep through the crowd and arrest potentially 300 or 400 demonstrators in the Fairfax district. By the time the words were written on a dry erase board, plans were out the window. Things had changed so quickly that became an impossibility. And now we've seen the result of that not happening hours and hours and hours ago. So there's no telling where the National Guard troops will be sent in the coming days. But again, at first, it sounds like it's going to be a supportive role, traffic control, crowd control, that sort of thing.
What we're seeing tonight is that the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department are really having to split resources here. What can you tell us about what's going on downtown?
Yeah, it's another complicating factor, as if the issues in the Fairfax district weren't taxing enough to both departments. Because remember, the LA County Sheriff's Department is responsible for the West Hollywood area, which is directly north, just across the street in some cases, from where the issues have been going on in the city of LA's district. That's drawn quite a bit of attention. downtown LA, the LAPD was for a time earlier this evening really relying on a lot of help from the California Highway Patrol, particularly when some demonstrators began to walk into freeway lanes. They were determined to not let that happen because people wandering around on the freeways creates a safety issue that is magnitudes more difficult than walking in surface streets. So the LAPD, again, relied on outside help to assist them, to take care of that. Downtown LA sounds like it's experiencing its pockets of unrest as well. It sounds like with hours into this, as needs have become clearer in specific places, the department is much better able now to manage where they're sending people than they were 3 or 4 hours ago. But again, it sounds like the department is relying on outside help as well to deal with whatever comes up.
You know, we've been talking about the protesters and the looters, two separate groups here. Does it appear to officers you've spoken with that these looters are really an organized group targeting certain areas? I mean, they've hit a couple of high-end shoe stores. They've hit a watch store. We saw some of them being arrested outside a Target. Is it a what's the word I'm looking for? An organized effort here.
I can tell you that prior to tonight's events, the officials that we're in contact with did not have indications that there was a plan or discussions amongst people who were on their way out deliberately to do harm to the community tonight to begin looting. It appears on the surface that much of this are opportunities that have come up. Empty blocks, businesses with windows smashed out already, and crowds that are being pushed in one particular direction or another by the lines of police officers that are trying to send the protesters on their way, send them home. The last thing they want to do, by the way, is arrest anybody. That creates a huge bureaucratic backlog, and it takes more and more time away from patrolling the streets and preventing things from happening in the first place. So the more protesters that can be encouraged just to leave on their own and go home, the better. One consequence of that is when they're all pushed in one particular direction, as we've seen tonight, some of the businesses that are on that route of exit seem to have become targets of opportunity. No indication from anyone monitoring particular social media or even some undercover officers that have been wandering through the crowds tonight that there was any sort of planned effort, much more so that an opportunity was seen. And with the advent of cell phones, it's very easy to coordinate efforts amongst 3 or 4 people, maybe unlike 30 years ago. So things may appear that there's more coordination. Doesn't sound like there was anything planned specifically in advance.
Definitely a crime of opportunity. Eric, we're going to let you get back to contacting some of your sources here as we continue to look at this area in the 7500 block of Melrose. We're going to bring in our friend Errol Southers. He is a professor at USC. He was with the FBI, local law enforcement. Errol, your list of accomplishments is too long for the hour we're on the air here, but let me just say welcome. He's also a terrorism expert. You look at what's going down here now. What's your reaction?
Well, my first reaction here, first, again, thank you for having me on, and obviously my condolences to Mr. Floyd, who I'm certain his family would not be happy with what's happening here right now. My first reaction is one of, obviously, public safety. And as LAPD rolled out, they went on attack alert 2 days ago, and they're now on 12-hour shifts. Their first concern is public safety to the people who were peacefully protesting, as well as to the officers who have to go out there and secure those areas. What we're seeing now is and unfortunately, the mayor, of course, invoked a curfew. And as your previous guest mentioned, I think what we're looking at with the looting and the fires are pure opportunists created by the exit route that's set up for people to leave. And as the police cover and protect territory, the saying goes, he who protects everything protects nothing. And people are asking me, why aren't they there where they're looting? Well, they can't be everywhere. So they're going to be going block by block to move people who are out past curfew. And as they're doing that, these opportunists, if you will, are hitting stores along the exit route. So I don't think that this is a plan to loot. I don't think this is some kind of some crew that's out working. I think these are pure opportunists taking advantage of unprotected stores that unfortunately are owned by local people who've been closed for the better part of 2 months because of COVID and now are victimized by theft and flame.
You know, Errol, at one point, we all know you were with the FBI, the SWAT. Do you ever envision, like, the feds being called in here? I mean, we do know they've asked for help from the National Guard, but there's a large contingency of federal agents in Westwood. Could you envision that happening?
I don't envision that happening, particularly since the governor has already requested the National Guard. As you mentioned, 1,000 of them will be here this evening. I think what you'll see in the way of federal resources, to be honest with you, will be the aftermath of investigations that will take place with regards to some of the assaults and the looting that's happening. But I do think with LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, the support of the National Guard, who will be in a purely supportive role until notified to do otherwise, I think that the manpower will be sufficient. And we've seen other cities around the country change their deployment. Minnesota today deployed about 3 to 4 times as many people as they had 2 nights ago, and the climate and the result was very, very different with regard to how much control they had. So there's nothing like overwhelming force when it comes to personnel, and I think that's going to make a huge difference when we got more people out there.
So tell me what goes into the planning as we move forward, Errol. We're looking tonight at what's happening. There have been some arrests, we understand. What happens now?
Well, the challenge now is how and do we go forward with peaceful protests? I mean, there are people who are peacefully protesting, and obviously we don't want to take that right away. But at this point, this is a public safety issue. So if there are going to be public protests, those areas are going to have to be established. They're going to have to be clearly defined, and they're not going to have to be able to let people to exit those areas if they do that. That's the one thing going forward, and the question that's going to remain tomorrow is, are we going to let people peacefully protest? Beyond that, again, it's saving life, it's saving property, it's protecting property. And, you know, I remember the 92 riots, and I remember the National Guard being here, and it was not pretty. So going forward, again, it's just whether or not the protests get to continue. And I think that's probably the big question for people who really were doing this the right way, in a way that the Floyd family would probably be proud of. And they have every right to do that. But at the risk of public safety right now, that may have to be at least temporarily halted in some respect.
Suspended in a way.
Make sure so we get everything under control.
You know, Errol, you and I have done a number of terrorism panels together. Your expertise for most of our viewers is terrorism. Typically, we're talking about Al-Qaeda and ISIS, but also domestic terrorism. Is this really kind of a form of that?
Well, it's not. This is not a form of that, and I want to be clear. These are people who are committing crimes, burglaries, at the least, and vandalism. There are reports around the country of people who belong to extremist organizations on the left and the right that might be part of these crowds. That is entirely possible. We have been tracking since COVID started a number of organizations that have been leveraging COVID for recruiting efforts, particularly those who are anti-government. So I think what's going to happen here is, you asked me about federal resources earlier, as we identify people who are out there, particularly those who may be, in some instances, breaking store windows and not entering, setting fires as arsonists. Those are the people that we're going to be looking at very closely to see who they are, what their connections are, and if they do have connections to those extremist organizations that you and I have talked about many times, that will take on a whole other investigation.
And do they use a situation like this as an opportunity, so then you have to put more people on that and worry about something else happening in the middle of all this?
Well, the one thing that I've mentioned since the beginning of COVID is, with all due respect to how challenging the global pandemic is let's not get laser focused and lose sight of the big picture. We still have homeland and national security to take advantage, or I should say take care of. And so as we are laser focused on a pandemic, these other organizations are taking advantage of the fact that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So we have, since day one, been paying close attention to extremist organizations that are growing, that are recruiting, that are hoping to get more people in their ranks while we're all focused on the pandemic. So yes, we do have to devote more resources to this, and we will be devoting more resources to this particular incident due to the reports around the country of extremists having infiltrated these peaceful protesters to make matters even worse.
This is the sort of thing you track on a regular basis. How do you stop it? I mean, we saw this start out peacefully at noon today at the Pan Pacific Park. There were a lot of people out there. There were teenagers, young people, older people, people of all ethnicities, and then it grew into this early on.
Well, a couple things happened. First of all, people are out there a long time. It gets frustrating standing there for a long time. At some point, they get moved by the police or they don't get moved. You can't make everybody happy. And it only takes one person to do one thing for there to be sort of a mob mentality, and it just escalates and cascades from there. And so I think that's part of it. I'm always concerned when I see the level of violence I saw today during daylight hours. And we saw that in 1992. When we saw the violence in the daytime, I said, we're going to be in trouble when nightfall comes. And I'm so glad the mayor introduced a curfew, because that at least stems some of it. But I think it's just from standing around idly, peacefully protesting. After a while, there's got to be some excitement. And it starts with breaking some windows, pushing some police officers, torching some cars, not obeying commands, and then it escalates. And that's what happened today.
Yeah, we really did see that. That describes it perfectly. Thank you so much. We want to keep you on the line. We'd like to talk to you some more. You have such great insight for us, but we want to bring in Earl Hutchinson, who has the most wonderful voice. We hear he's a TV critic and author, and you're always a voice of reason. I know I've interviewed you before, especially on racism issues. We
It's in the vicinity of the space station and attached to the space station. So that was a huge learning curve for crew. We human rated a spacecraft for a portion of the mission, and then for crew, you just have to obviously expand it for the whole mission. It's in the vicinity of the space.
Something them at all.
Well, you've got now yet another skirmish line on the west side of that fire too. Seen at the bottom of the screen there. There are some looters at the intersection. Some people driving and turning around here, but you've got a skirmish line on both sides of this fire, and they are keeping those firefighters safe as they prepare to, as you mentioned, I would imagine they're getting ready to pull out their hose and start fighting this fire. But again, nothing is normal tonight.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I wonder if we can we check in with Leanne yet?
I think what's going, okay, it might be safe for her to talk right now. I got the sense that there were a lot of some people around you that might not have been the most desirable folks. Is that correct, or are you ready to go, or no? Should we wait?
Yeah, we are good. We're good to go. We're here at the corner of Melrose now in Fairfax. Let me just show you what we're seeing right now. This is one example of what you can find all over. A trash can on fire here in the middle of the street. You can look down towards the east here, and you can see that's the fire at Spalding. That Air 7, Chris Christie has been covering this nonstop. You can see all these fire engines now rushing to that. Along the way here, if we can pan over a little bit to the left, you see on that pink building there, Bill, it looks like, see there, oh, they're boarding it up. They're trying to board up their building here to try to protect it. tonight from any looters and any stuff like that. We still see groups of kids out there, or I shouldn't say even kids, I don't know, I can't tell from here, but groups of people that are out there still running around all these businesses. We've seen a couple of them trying to get into some of these businesses here, but it doesn't appear they've succeeded, at least in this block that we've had. Let me spin around this way and show you too what we're looking. The other direction, looking to the west, you can see a whole line of police cars down there. Another situation happening to the west here on Melrose. Now the LAPD has moved all the way up Fairfax and brought their skirmish line up here to Melrose again as they continue to try to push all of these protesters out. We just heard a flashbang a short time ago as they were trying to clear out some of the groups of folks that were running around up here down to the west. I don't know what is happening exactly all the way down Melrose to the west here, headed in that direction, but there is a large police contingency down there. I know that I'd heard that there had been another group of protesters and whatnot in that direction. But over here, I'm going to spin. Here we got a bunch running, so I'm not sure what's going on down here. We'll start walk down this way a little bit and see what we can find. We saw them, a group kind of gathering right here, and then they all headed down the street towards this fire. But then all of the, once all the fire engines, once they arrived, then there wasn't, they all started to run the opposite direction. I'm seeing, yeah, so I'm almost at a loss for words, I have to say. I just have never seen anything like this. I mean, it has happened before. I covered all the protests when it happened with Ferguson. We had so many protests going on in the city when that was going on, and it's amazing to see. Just everywhere you look, there is a situation, there is a problem, there is some vandalism going on. The city clearly struggling tonight. And it's very tough to see. You can see a lot of folks out tonight. Obviously not many heeding the 8 p.m. Curfew. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, we've been with you since about, 3:45 this afternoon, and we're watching as they've slowly tried to, the skirmish line tried to, move those protesters out of that area. But, in a matter of hours, it's taken to just go a couple blocks. And it's been, there you go, some more people running away.
Okay, I hear somebody walking up to you, and I see a bunch of people running. Are you going to have to take off from there?
Can I hear you? Can you take just so I can hear you? Hold on. I mean, he has a point. He wants to make a point about this. Tell me, what's your first name at least?
I'm D.
D, what were you saying? What is this really about?
This is about the oppression that the LAPD and all police have brought on the people since they've been given that authority. The Los Angeles Police Department was brought into Los Angeles first as a KKK from the South, as the KKK. That is a well-known fact. So to say that it's not built on racism is just ridiculous. This right here, this is a built, spoiled over oppression. In '92, we burned down our own things because we were still fed up, but we didn't know how to fight. And this year...
Here, come on over, D. Let's be on the other side of this.
Wait.
This is where Bill and I, we're moving out. Normally, we stay on the other side of the skirmish line. Let me say that. This is how we normally do it. Yeah, we're okay. We stay behind police is usually how we do it. Tonight, we got a little separated from them, but you can see them moving in. Hey, Bill, this line's over here. Yeah, we're moving back over here by the police. Once you stay behind a skirmish line, you stay pretty safe. You don't get caught in the middle, but this time we were out there a little bit. They're just clearing everybody through. So you heard it again, D expressing his frustration with everything that is going on. And, there has been a lot of pent-up frustration, anger, obviously, within the community. And so this is what is happening, they're saying. That it's just coming out. They just need to get it out. Again, the LAPD making a stand. They've made this skirmish line. Yep.
Sorry, yeah, we're going to come back to you in a couple of seconds, Leanne. We want to let our viewers know it is 10 o'clock now. You're looking at Eyewitness News continuing coverage of the unrest in the city of Los Angeles. We have buildings that have burned, police vehicles that have been trashed, people who have been arrested, And here are tonight's major headlines. What originally began as a peaceful protest over police brutality has since spiraled out of control into a mixture of widespread looting, arson, and violence.
LA Mayor Eric Garcetti expanded a curfew first set for downtown to the entire city from 8 p.m. Saturday to 5:30 a.m. Sunday. After initially saying the National Guard would not be called in to defend the city, Garcetti later announced that over 1,000 troops were on their way and they could be arriving by midnight tonight.
As a result of the violence we have been covering, LA has been forced to temporarily close all of its COVID-19 testing centers.
Yeah, he said all of them, and this afternoon. That's a shame because a lot of people are depending on those testing sites, but just for the safety of the people in the city, they had to close them down. And we're looking at pictures of this fire that is taking place along Melrose Avenue
and Spalding.
And it looks like this building is going to be a complete loss. It's been going up in flames for quite some time now, and the fire engines finally got there, and it looks like a foregone conclusion, though, that building is a goner.
Yeah, and what's sad is that they'd been out here before. The firefighters were there before, and they had sprayed a lot of water on it, moved on because they're so overtaxed and spread so thin. And then, unfortunately, the flames kicked back up again, and so they're back here. And that is now a threat to the businesses on either side of it. There's a Starbucks, I believe, on the corner, right? And there's an the Urban Outfitters, I think, across the street is okay, but that place was being looted. But there are other businesses in the same kind of structure that are very close by, if not sharing the same wall, and they're in danger now of exposure from this fire. Just to recap, just in terms of the toll that this has taken on our staff and the effect that it has had. Our Carlos Granda about 3 hours ago was at Santa Monica Boulevard and Rodeo Drive, where it appears that Beverly Hills police deployed tear gas to disperse a crowd that had gathered after some stores had been looted on Rodeo Drive, including the Gucci store. So he was tear gassed. He kept reporting. And then a little while ago, I still don't know the name of the cameraman who was downtown at 5th and Broadway, between 5th and 6th. But he kept going as well, even though people were somebody pushed him and people threw water bottles at
we
him.
can show you Carlos Granda from earlier, just about a couple hours ago, I think now.
We just got hit by tear gas. You can see it over there. It happened at Rodeo Drive and Santa Monica. Oh, I got to stop because I can barely, I can't even keep my eyes open. I'm sorry if I sound a little bit, it's just that my eyes are watering and I can barely breathe. Oh, wow. And yeah, it's just hitting us now, so we're waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, so that was a tough one for Carlos. He had to go and rinse out his eyes, and he came back. He's okay now, but nevertheless, you know, that was kind of had to be a traumatic thing for Carlos.
Yeah, but an indication, too, of his dedication, because the story needs to be told, and he stayed to tell it, even though he was paying a physical price for that. The same with our cameraman our camera person at 5th, between 5th and 6th. On Broadway. They're being assaulted by those three men, having water bottles thrown at him, and at least one of them pushed him. So it's been a tough night for our people out there in the field, and it's a tough night for everybody watching not only this, but of course, as we have been seeing the video earlier this week of George Floyd and his alleged murder by a police officer who's now been arrested on a charge of murder. That's in Minneapolis. The city of Minneapolis, by the way, we haven't been able to show you much this evening because we've been dealing with LA. That city has been erupting now for several days.
Yeah.
There have been fires, there's been looting, people have been injured, a number of people arrested, and as bad as LA looks right now, Minneapolis has had it a lot worse because of the proximity to the actual incident and just the fact that people are very, very angry. A lot of people have a lot to be angry about.
Certainly do. And on the right side of your screen there you see the protest earlier today began very peacefully. It started at Pan Pacific Park, about 600 people, quickly grew. At one point, Chris Christie was estimating almost 10,000 people, but then it dwindled to about a fifth of that, and that's when the problem started to happen in the Fairfax district. We saw multiple patrol cars completely vandalized. Oh, this is it. Okay, so you see that car up there? That is a patrol car, completely engulfed. But what you're going to see soon is that all the cars around there, all the patrol cars, completely vandalized, windshields kicked in, graffiti all over them, hardly unrecognizable. There you have it. There you see it. Just every car. And every tire slashed as well on those 8 or so vehicles right there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much a police unit costs because they're modified. They, of course, have to be specially modified. And, you know, a base one of these Explorers, I think, is around $30,000. And then there's modifications to the suspension, and they got to put the radios and all the mounts in there and all the modifications. So it's the financial loss to the city of LA losing that many police cars is substantial. The overtime that is being paid to all these officers and firefighters is substantial. The human toll, of course, as people are injured. A number of police officers have been injured in this. Civilians injured as well, we presume, although we haven't seen that yet. People are being hit, as you see here, by pepper rounds, by rubber bullets. Just the cost so far has been pretty difficult. Pretty difficult to deal with.
I'm sorry, what did you say,
Producer? Tremendous fraud. You have all of the harvesting.
Okay, no, this is the scene where people were using garbage bins as body shields against these police officers that you see there
you think the race is over, you think somebody won, and then all of a sudden out of blue,
the ward runner there on the car.
What happened?
Yeah. Watch as these people take these bins. And it's near Studio City. I'm sorry, gosh, my brain is
CBS TV City. Well, you've only been on the air for 7 hours straight.
CBS Television City, and they are going to smash the gates. They approach the gates of it, and they use these. I hope we have that video.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, there we go. So if you keep watching, yep, there you go. And they'll succeed eventually. And there is a security guard there who had to pull his gun and tell them to back away. But they were trying to make a run for it. There you see the security guard there, and he has his gun drawn, and they say, okay, I'm leaving. However, it doesn't end there because the gates are closed, and you'll see what happens again. And a kid got trapped between a trash bin and the gate.
Yeah, you're watching this play out, and this the reason this was one of the reasons maybe they wanted to get in is that this was being used as a staging area in that area by the police department. There are a bunch of police cars back in that parking lot behind this gate.
This kid right here is about to get it. And, you know, and then shortly after that, a lot of LAPD came walking out of there since that was their staging center there. But just a lot of scenes like that today that seem surreal.
An attack that failed, an attack on police there that failed, clearly acts of violence there that are part of this that have been going on now for the better part of, about 9 hours, I guess, since this began. Most of the beginning part of it, as you have mentioned, was peaceful. But then the crowd thinned, the crowd diminished, and what was left behind are people who are doing harm.
The PD had to resort to using the rubber bullets, non-lethal bullets, to just smash the ground, like you said, right in front of their legs, so at least it would just bounce up and hit their legs, enough to cause injury, not to cause injury, but to hurt, sting, and to get that crowd dispersed. Also had to use their batons as well on the crowd.
Yeah, and those crowds, now the crowds are pretty much gone. What you have now are roving bands of people going from place to place, either lighting fires or looting stores or attacking police, and as we saw in downtown LA, attacking reporters. And so it's a difficult night. It is a long night. Again, looking at that building now on Melrose and Spalding, this is a building that for the second time tonight, firefighters have responded to. They put the fire out earlier, or thought they had to move on because they are spread so thin, move on to another location. And now they're back because the fire flared up, and now they're putting it out yet again. So, and this was a building that we understand was vacant.
And they're really trying to keep those flames from going to that Starbucks right next door. You can see they're hosing in between the two buildings, because you can see a bit of flames in between there. So hopefully they can keep it just contained to that vacant building.
Oh yeah, they are spraying right in between there.
Yeah.
And again, they've been under police escort because they're finding, I guess, that they're getting attacked, or at risk of attack at least, as these firefighters respond to the various buildings. And so they are being escorted in by law enforcement officers to just get in and do their jobs. All right, who do we have right now that we can get to?